Everything exceeded my expectations back then because I had no concept of what the movie business was. And to go from film to film, I just thought that's the way it was. Once you started making movies, then you just made all the movies.
In 2002, Josh Hartnett was the most sought-after actor in Hollywood. Studios were throwing franchise roles at him like he was the second coming of Tom Cruise. He turned down Batman, he turned down Spider-Man, he turned down Superman. Roles that would have made him hundreds of millions of dollars and turned him into one of the biggest stars on the planet. Then he just disappeared. By 2010, most people forgot he existed. What happened to the guy who was supposed to be the next big thing? The answer isn't what you think, and it reveals exactly how brutal Hollywood can be when you don't play by their rules. The Golden Boy Era. Joshua Daniel Hartnett was born on July 21, 1978, in San Francisco, but grew up in Minnesota. He wasn't some theater kid dreaming of stardom. He played football and was planning to study architecture in college. Acting happened almost by accident when a friend dragged him to an audition in high school. He got the part, discovered he was good at it, and decided to move to New York after graduation to study at SUNY Purchase. Within a year, he dropped out and moved to Los Angeles. At 19, he was doing TV guest spots and commercial work, just another hopeful kid trying to make it. His breakthrough came in 1998 with Halloween H20, the sequel that brought Jamie Lee Curtis back to the franchise. Josh played the boyfriend, and even though it was a supporting role, teenage girls noticed him immediately. The same year, he starred in The Faculty, a sci-fi horror film about alien teachers taking over a high school. Robert Rodriguez directed it, and the cast included Elijah Wood and Clea Duvall. But Josh was the standout. He had this classic good looks thing happening, like he'd stepped out of a 1950s matinee, but with enough edge to feel modern. Teen magazines started putting him on covers, and Hollywood started paying attention. Then Pearl Harbor happened in 2001, and Josh's life changed completely. Michael Bay directed this massive World War II epic about the Japanese attack, and Josh played Rafe McCauley, a pilot in a love triangle with Ben Affleck and Kate Beckinsale. The movie was a cultural event, marketed as the biggest romance of the summer. It made $450 million worldwide, which was huge for 2001. Josh was 22 years old and suddenly one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. Girls wanted to date him, guys wanted to be him, and studios wanted to sign him to everything. He got paid $5 million for Pearl Harbor, which for someone that young and relatively inexperienced was incredible. But here's what nobody talks about. The critics absolutely destroyed Pearl Harbor. They called it jingoistic, melodramatic, and emotionally manipulative. The love story was mocked as corny. Josh took a lot of the blame because he was the emotional center of the film, and reviewers said he didn't have the depth to carry it. This planted a seed in Josh's mind that would grow into a major problem. He started believing that blockbusters were beneath him, that they'd ruin his credibility as a serious actor. He was young and insecure about the criticism, and instead of understanding that critics always hate Michael Bay movies, he internalized it as a personal failure. Later in 2001, Josh starred in Black Hawk Down, Ridley Scott's intense military drama about the Battle of Mogadishu. He played Staff Sergeant Matt Eversman, and this time the critics loved him. The movie made $173 million and earned him respect as an actor who could handle serious material. Then, in 2002, he did 40 Days and 40 Nights, a romantic comedy where he played a guy giving up intimacy for Lent. The movie was silly, and got mediocre reviews, but it made $95 million and cemented Josh as a legitimate sex symbol. People magazine was talking about him as one of the sexiest men alive. He was dating actresses, showing up at premieres, and living the life every young actor dreams about. On paper, everything was perfect. Behind the scenes, Josh was starting to crack under the pressure. The rejection spree. Between 2002 and 2005, Josh Hartnett made a series of decisions that would destroy his career. And it all started with Batman. Christopher Nolan was developing Batman Begins, a dark reimagining of the superhero franchise after the disaster of Batman and Robin in 1997. Warner Brothers wanted Josh badly for the role of Bruce Wayne. Nolan personally met with him multiple times, explaining his vision for a grounded, psychological take on the character. Josh said no. He later explained that he didn't want to be locked into a franchise, that he wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, and that wearing a costume felt like selling out. Christian Bale took the role instead, and Batman Begins made $373 million in 2005. The Dark Knight in 2008 made over $1 billion. By the time The Dark Knight Rises came out in 2012, Bale had earned over $50 million from the trilogy and become one of the biggest movie stars in the world. Josh watched all of this happen from the outside. But Batman wasn't the only massive role Josh turned down. He also passed on Superman Returns, which Bryan Singer was directing for Warner Brothers. The studio offered him serious money to play Clark Kent, and Josh said no for the same reasons. He didn't want to be defined by a superhero role. Brandon Routh took the part instead, and while Superman Returns underperformed at $391 million, it would have kept Josh relevant in the blockbuster conversation. Then there's the Spider-Man situation, which is murkier. Some reports say Josh was offered the role before Tobey Maguire. Others say he was just in talks. Either way, he wasn't interested. Spider-Man in 2002 made $821 million. Spider-Man 2 in 2004 made $783 million. Spider-Man 3 in 2007 made $894 million. If Josh had done all three films at $10 million each, that's $30 million he walked away from. And that's being conservative. The total value of the roles Josh rejected is staggering. Between Batman, Superman, and potentially Spider-Man, he turned down over $100 million in guaranteed salary, not counting back-end deals and residuals. More importantly, he turned down becoming one of the most famous actors on Earth. Studios were furious with him. In Hollywood, when you reject a major franchise offer, you're not just saying no to one movie. You're saying the studio's vision isn't good enough for you. Executives remembered every rejection, and Josh's name started appearing on internal blacklists. He developed a reputation as difficult, uncommercial, and ungrateful. For a 25-year-old actor with only a few hits to his name, this was career destruction. So what did Josh choose instead? In 2004, he starred in Wicker Park, a psychological thriller remake that made only $21 million on a $30 million budget. In 2005, he did Mozart and the Whale, an indie drama about two people with Asperger's syndrome that barely got released. In 2006, he starred in Lucky Number 11, a stylish crime thriller with Bruce Willis and Morgan Freeman that has since become a cult favorite but made only $56 million at the time. These were the artistic, serious films Josh wanted to do, and they all flopped commercially. Studios looked at his choices and saw an actor with no commercial instincts who couldn't tell the difference between good scripts and pretentious nonsense. Then, in 2007, Josh starred in 30 Days of Night, a horror film about vampires attacking an Alaskan town during the month-long polar night. It made $75 million on a $30 million budget, so technically it was a success. But it hurt Josh's image as a leading man. You don't go from romantic lead in Pearl Harbor to vampire movie star without people assuming your career is sliding downward. By 2008, the big offers had completely dried up. Josh was only 30 years old, and Hollywood had already moved on. The actors who took the roles he rejected were now on magazine covers and getting offered everything. Josh was doing indie films that went straight to DVD. The mental health crisis. What the public didn't know during all of this was that Josh was struggling badly with anxiety and panic attacks. The fame from Pearl Harbor hit him so fast and so hard that he never adjusted to it. Paparazzi followed him everywhere. He couldn't go to a restaurant, a gym, or even a grocery store without cameras in his face. Tabloids published stories about who he was dating, what he was wearing, where he was going. For someone who valued privacy and had only been famous for a year, this was overwhelming. The early 2000s were brutal for celebrity culture. This was before social media, so paparazzi were even more aggressive because tabloid magazines paid huge money for exclusive photos. Josh later described feeling hunted, like he couldn't exist in public without becoming content for someone else's profit. There was also a stalker incident that scared him deeply. A woman showed up at his home multiple times, and when security finally removed her, she started sending threatening letters. Josh realized that fame had made him vulnerable in ways he never anticipated, and it genuinely frightened him. But in 2005, you couldn't talk about mental health in Hollywood without being labeled weak or difficult. Josh suffered in silence. His relationship with Scarlett Johansson from 2005 to 2006 made everything worse. Scarlett was one of the biggest young actresses in Hollywood, and their relationship became tabloid gold. Every date was photographed, every fight was reported, every moment of their private life was dissected by strangers. Josh later said that dating someone famous made it impossible to have a real relationship because you're constantly performing for the public. When they broke up, the media blamed Josh, painting him as the guy who couldn't handle being with someone more successful. It was humiliating, and it reinforced his desire to escape the spotlight entirely. Years later, Josh dated Amanda Seyfried, and the same thing happened. Constant scrutiny, constant speculation, constant invasion. He realized that as long as he was famous, he'd never have a normal personal life. This sounds dramatic, but for someone who grew up in Minnesota and valued privacy, the trade-off of fame for happiness started feeling like a terrible deal. Josh made a decision that most actors never make. He chose his mental health over his career. In 2008, he essentially walked away from Hollywood, moving back to Minnesota and doing everything he could to disappear from public consciousness. In 2014, Josh thought he had a comeback opportunity with Penny Dreadful, a Showtime horror series set in Victorian London. He played Ethan Chandler, an American sharpshooter with a dark secret, and the show got strong reviews. Josh was finally getting recognition again, doing interesting work on a prestige TV show. Then, after 3 seasons, Showtime canceled it in 2016. Josh later said this felt like a betrayal because the network had used his name to give the show credibility, and once they got what they needed, they dropped it. He realized Hollywood hadn't actually wanted him back. They just wanted to use what was left of his name value. This was the moment Josh accepted that his relationship with the industry was over. The wilderness years. Around 2008, Josh did something almost no successful actor does. He moved back to his home state of Minnesota. He bought a house, started living like a normal person, and essentially quit Hollywood. He'd show up for small roles occasionally, but his life wasn't about acting anymore. In 2013, he met Tamsin Egerton, a British actress, and they started a relationship that actually worked because neither of them cared about fame. They had 4 children together and split their time between Minnesota and the UK. Josh coached his kids' sports teams, did local theater productions, and even taught acting classes at small studios. People would recognize him occasionally and be shocked that he was just living a regular suburban life. The films he did during this period were so small that most people didn't know he was still acting. In 2017, he starred in Oh, Lucy, a Japanese-American indie film about a woman learning English. It played at a few film festivals and made less than $1 million. In 2019, he did Inherit the Viper, a crime drama about opioid dealers in Appalachia that went straight to streaming. These weren't bad movies, but they were the kind of projects that pay $50,000, not $5 million. Josh was fine with that because he'd saved his money from his peak years, and these small films let him act without the pressure of carrying a blockbuster. In interviews during this period, Josh seemed genuinely content. He'd talk about his kids, his normal life, and how much he didn't miss Hollywood. He said fame had made him miserable, and stepping away was the best decision he ever made. But there was always an undercurrent of sadness, because you could tell he still loved acting. He just hated everything that came with being a movie star. He'd essentially exiled himself from the thing he was best at because the industry refused to let him do it on his own terms. The financial cost of his choices is staggering when you actually calculate it. If Josh had taken Batman, Superman, and done even one major franchise, he'd be worth over $200 million today, similar to Christian Bale. His actual estimated net worth is around $25 million, which sounds like a lot until you realize what he left on the table. The 3 Batman films alone would have earned him at least $50 million with back-end deals. Spider-Man could have been another $30 million across 3 films. Superman, even though it underperformed, would have been $20 million minimum. That's $100 million in career earnings he walked away from, and that's being conservative. On top of that, franchise stars get offered other high-paying roles because studios trust them. Josh's decision to reject blockbusters didn't just cost him those specific roles. It cost him the entire career he would have had afterward. The real reason. Here's what really happened. Hollywood doesn't forgive rejection, especially not multiple rejections from the same person. When Josh turned down Batman, studios noticed. When he turned down Superman 2, they got annoyed. When it became clear he was systematically rejecting every major franchise offer to do pretentious indie films that nobody watched, he got blacklisted. Not officially, because that would be illegal, but functionally. Casting directors stopped submitting his name for big roles. Agents stopped pushing him because they knew it was pointless. By 2007, when Josh was 29 years old, he was essentially unemployable at the level he'd been at just 5 years earlier. The industry saw his rejections as arrogance. Here was a kid who got lucky with Pearl Harbor and thought he was too good for commercial movies. Meanwhile, actors like Christian Bale proved you could do Batman and still be taken seriously as an artist. Josh's whole theory that franchises would ruin his credibility was wrong, and by the time he realized it, the door had closed. Studios had moved on to actors who'd commit to multi-picture deals and show up to every press event with enthusiasm. In the franchise era of the 2000s and 2010s, you were either all in or you were out. Josh chose out, and Hollywood made sure he stayed there. But there's a timing element that makes this even more tragic. If Josh had peaked in the 1990s, his choices would have made sense. Back then, actors could bounce between blockbusters and indie films without consequence. If he'd peaked in the 2000s, his indie credibility would actually be valuable, because streaming platforms need content and don't care about traditional box office. But Josh peaked right when the franchise era was beginning, from 2001 to 2008. This was when studios realized they could build cinematic universes and lock actors into 6-film contracts. Josh's desire for creative freedom put him directly at odds with where the industry was heading. He was the wrong actor at the wrong time in history. The mental health angle is the part people are only now starting to understand. In 2005, if an actor said they were struggling with anxiety and needed to step back, they'd be seen as weak and unreliable. Studios would have dropped them immediately. Josh couldn't be honest about what he was going through, so instead he made excuses about artistic integrity and wanting to do serious films. The real reason was simpler. Fame was making him sick, and he didn't know how to handle it. If this had happened today, with therapy being normalized and mental health being part of the conversation, Josh might have been able to take a break and come back. But in the 2000s, you either kept going or your career died. The unexpected return. In 2023, something unexpected happened. Josh appeared in Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's biographical drama about the creation of the atomic bomb. His role was small, playing Ernest Lawrence, but people noticed him. It had been so long since Josh was in a major film that seeing him on screen felt like a throwback. Younger viewers who didn't remember his peak years discovered him for the first time. The film made $950 million worldwide and won 7 Academy Awards. Josh didn't get any awards recognition, but it reminded Hollywood that he could still act. Then, in 2024, M. Night Shyamalan cast Josh as the lead in Trap, a thriller about a father who realizes he's walked into a police trap while at a concert with his daughter. Shyamalan specifically wanted Josh because he remembered him from his 2000s peak and thought he'd bring a specific vulnerability to the role. The movie got mixed reviews, but it made $82 million worldwide, and Josh got praise for his performance. At 46 years old, he was finally working again at a level that felt meaningful, even if it wasn't the superstardom he'd walked away from. The difference now is that Josh isn't trying to be a leading man anymore. He's embraced being a character actor, taking interesting supporting roles without the pressure of carrying a film. He's married with 4 kids, lives quietly in the UK, and only does projects that genuinely interest him. In recent interviews, he's been honest about his past mistakes, admitting that he probably should have done at least one franchise and that his fear of being typecast was probably overblown. But he also stands by his decision to prioritize mental health and family over fame.